Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. My name is Tan Xiao Chin, and I'm moderating the 6th YouTube session of the 8th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 13 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in this session. You can check out our work at the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. Now, we have a very special guest for today's live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session, the fabulous mystery crime author, Rhys Bowen. Now, Rhys is the New York Times and #1 Kindle best-selling author of the Molly Murphy and Royal Spyness historical mysteries, as well as several internationally best-selling historical novels. A transplanted Brit, she now divides her time between California and Arizona. And here she is. Hi, Rhys.
Hi, how are you? Hi.
I'm good, thank you. Welcome to Read for Pixels, Rhys.
Thank you.
Okay, and to our audience, aside from being with us here today, Rhys has also generously donated 2 super exclusive goodie bundles to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. And the good news is that these are available to donors worldwide. Now, goodie number 1 is the Molly Murphy gift bundle. This is Rhys's special treat for fans of her excellent Molly Murphy series, especially those who are book collectors. Yes, the bundle includes 1 first edition, signed and personalized hardcover Molly Murphy book of your choice. And not just the one that Rhys showed, you can choose any Molly Murphy book that you want. And it also includes 1 handwritten letter on special old paper by Molly Murphy herself. And goodie number 2 is the Lady Georgiana gift bundle. If you are a fan of the Royal Spyness series and or a book collector, Rhys is donating 1 first edition, signed and personalized hardcover Royal Spyness book of your choice. And this also includes 1 handwritten letter on special old paper by Lady Georgiana herself. Now, there is only 1 of each gift bundle available, and once they are gone, they are gone. So do be first in line to make the requested donation, and Rhys will send your chosen gift bundle straight to you. Now, our fundraiser this time around is going a bit slowly as we've only reached $780 of our $5,000 goal. So please do give generously. Every cent goes towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. If you're watching this session on YouTube right now, you will also be able to ask Rhys questions live. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen, and Juliana, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Rhys to answer. Now, over to you, Rhys. What will you be reading for us today?
Well, I'm reading my latest book in the Royal Spyness series, and it's called The Last Mrs. Summers. And if any of you have read the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is a lot of people's favorites, I decided to write a complete spoof of Rebecca, you know, with the scary old house and the alarming housekeeper and a mysterious death in the past. But of course, these books, this is my lighter series. The Molly Murphys are more about an Irish immigrant woman, immigrant experience, and of course, a lot more serious, a lot more meaty. The Royal Spyness ones, I want you to chuckle. We all need chuckles at this time, don't we? So she's related to the royal family. This is rather bad timing because she's much nicer than Meghan Markle. So she's related to the royal family, but she's completely penniless. So through various books, she's been trying to make her own way in life. Things have got better as we're up to now. This is book 14. So she's survived fairly well after a very rocky start in this series. And she's now married very happily. And her best friend comes to her and has just inherited a property in Cornwall. That's in the west of England. And says to her, want to drive with me and come and see my property? And Georgie thinks this will be a great adventure. So they drive down to Cornwall together. And they find the property is not at all what they thought. They're thinking it will be these charming seaside residents. It's this awful little cottage perched on a cliff with no proper bathroom or anything. And so it doesn't go very well to start with. And then they think that someone has been using it as a smuggling place. And so they're on the quayside deciding what to do next. And this is what happened. Belinda nodded. She'd been staring down the estuary in the direction of Trewoma. Now she turned back to the tackle shop. They might know where we could find a cup of tea, she said. As she was about to go, a man was coming out, his arms laden with several packages. He almost bumped into her. "Oh, I'm frightfully sorry," he said. Then he squinted, frowned, and exclaimed, "My God, it's Belinda. What in God's name are you doing here?" "Uncle Francis," Belinda cried, "I had no idea you were in this part of the world." "Oh, yes, rather. Lying low for a while, don't you know?" Now I had a chance to examine him. I could see the resemblance. He had Belinda's dark eyes and straight nose, but his features were now marred by bags under those eyes and sagging jowls. He wore a jaunty yachting cap and sported a pencil-thin moustache in the manner of Clark Gable. I could see he might have been handsome once, but has lived too much of a good life for too long. "So where are you living?" she asked. "Have you bought a place down here?" "Not exactly a place, my dear child. Having not inherited a fortune like you, but a mere pittance to keep me off the streets. Unfortunately, I was not the favoured one. My dear mamma did not trust my judgment when it came to money. I was left an allowance, pocket money, like a child. So I bought a boat. Nice little craft, 40-footer, big enough to live on, and I've got her moored across the way in Padstow. I go up and down the coast as the mood takes me, even across the channel when I feel daring. Fancy free, that's me." He had a light and high-pitched voice for his size. He was smiling as he spoke, but I noticed his eyes darted around as if he was scared of being noticed. "More to the point, what are you doing here?" he asked. "There's nothing for you in this part of the world, is there, now that Tringilly's long gone?" "Actually, part of my inheritance was a fishing cottage called White Sails," Belinda said. "That old ruin? My darling child, you're welcome to it. I don't know what you do with it. It's good for nothing except smuggling brandy." "You're right, it is pretty ghastly," she said. "You're not staying there?" he asked. "Last night, that was enough. But we've invited to stay at Trewoma. Rather more civilized, don't you think?" "Tremona, my, that's moving up in the world, although the new owner is not my favourite person." "Tony Summers, you mean? You know him?" "Summers, yes, that's the name. I can't say I know him, certainly know of him. He owns the mooring rights to this stretch of river. He's raising the prices, charging a fortune, and the crab and lobster rights too. A fellow can't even catch himself a decent lobster without running afoul of that blighter Summers and the local law." He wagged a chubby finger at her. "You might just point out to him that the local chappies like me are struggling to pay his rents while he lives in luxury. He'll pay for it when the communists take over." Belinda laughed. "Are they about to take over? And don't tell me you're a communist. I seem to remember you were always fond of the good things of life." "I'd willingly change my tune to see that blighter Summers get his just desserts," he snapped. "In fact, I'd like you to put some rat poison in his tea while you're there. I'd be very grateful. Do it for your old uncle, eh?" "What an awful thing to say," Belinda said. He gave a high-pitched giggle. "Just a joke, you know. Anyway, must fly. Have to see a man about a dog before I catch a ferry back to Padstow with this lot. I have to repaint her bottom sometime. Toodaloo. We must meet at the pub while you're here. Catch up on the good old days at Tringilly, what?" He didn't wait for an answer, but strode in the direction of the jetty. Belinda turned to me. "Sorry if I didn't introduce you, but I can't stand the man. I never could. I never trusted him even when I was a child. He was one of those uncles who like to sit you on his knee and let his hands wander while all the time pretending he's playing a game with you." "How awful," I said. She nodded. Luckily, in those days, he was rarely home. He always had some sort of get-rich scheme he was promoting, or he'd find someone to take him to the continent. Granny despaired of him. She'd say, "That boy will be the ruin of me yet." But I wonder why he chose to come back here again. I don't see him enjoying a pint with the local fishermen. Of course, if there is still smuggling going on, that would be more his style. She started to walk away. "Come on. I think we've dadded long enough. We can head to the next unpleasant encounter at Trewoma." So there we are. That's Belinda's uncle. And I'm afraid, since I chose that because it was rather apropos of what we're talking about today, which is violence against women. And of course, violence isn't always obvious. And that sort of uncle with the wandering hands comes up again in the book later. And I think in those days, when children were not believed as much or children were not encouraged to say as much, I think that sort of thing went on a lot more. So we'll see if Uncle Francis comes to a bad end in the book or not.
Yes, I do remember that, and I do include the last Mrs. Summers in a question later on. But before that, so let's get to the first batch of questions. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have written many novels that feature independent and resourceful female protagonists. For example, two of your popular historical mystery series, the Molly Murphy series and the Royal Spyness series, have resourceful and compelling female characters. Who or what are your inspirations for your female characters?
Well, it's interesting. I can tell you about Molly Murphy. I had been writing a series that included a Welsh police constable, Constable Evans, and he was a nice chap, and you would have liked him, and it would be the sort of nice man you'd like your daughter to bring home. But he was beginning to annoy me because he was too polite. And so I wanted to write about someone who wasn't always so polite, who wasn't always quite wise, who didn't know when to back off, who had a very strong sense of justice and sometimes put herself in harm's way because she was not always wise. So I was itching to write about a woman like this. And I have to say the inspiration for her came from me. I have never been a shrinking violet. I spent a lot of time at school standing outside the door because I spoke up. Usually it wasn't for myself. If I thought the teacher was picking on someone else, I would say, oh, that's not right. She didn't mean to say that. And the teacher would say, go and stand outside the door. So
No.
I spent a lot of time outside the door. And I've always had this very strong sense of justice. If I read something in a book or something that's not right, I immediately, and also when I'm in the supermarket and I'm in the quick check line and it says 10 items or fewer, I have to stand in that line and look at the person ahead of me and go 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 12 items. So you can see where Molly Murphy comes from, and so I knew I wanted to write about that sort of very gutsy female, not always wise but brave, and I wanted to know where to put her. And then I had I went to Ellis Island one day, and it was a place, just an afternoon out, and I thought I had a free afternoon in New York. I hopped on a ferry, went to Ellis Island, and I was completely unprepared for the emotional overload I felt there. I just felt standing on that island, the walls were absolutely crying out with what they'd seen in the past. And I thought, I have to set a book here. I just have to tell somebody's story. And so Molly Murphy, in the first book in the series called Murphy's Law, she is a young Irish woman, and she has to flee from Ireland when she accidentally kills the man who's trying to rape her. And he's the landowner's son, and she realizes she'll get no justice. So she flees as far as she can. And she gets as far as Ellis Island using another woman's name. I can't explain how that is. You have to read the book to find out. But on Ellis Island, while she's there, a murder occurs. And the name that she has chosen shows up as the prime suspect. So that was how the whole series started. And that's what got her to New York. So, I would say the inspiration for her is me. The inspiration for the Royal Spyness books was quite different. My editor kept saying to me, we can't really break you out unless you write a big, dark, standalone novel. And I kept thinking, serial killers, terrorists poisoning the water supply. And then I thought, do I want to spend 6 months in darkness like that? And I thought, no. So I dug my heels in. I thought, what would be the most unlikely sleuth I could come up with? How about if she was royal, but she was penniless? And it was the 1930s when, the whole world was in upheaval. You had the Great Depression, you had the rise of Hitler and Nazism. So you had really interesting stories waiting to be told. So I sat down and I started the series in that first person, and I gave it to my agent, and she said, "Oh, I love this." And we gave it to the editor, and she went, "No, no, no, that wasn't what we wanted at all." So my agent put it out to bids, and it went to another publishing house where it immediately did very well. And so the first publisher kept pretending it didn't exist for a long time. And then they started saying, well, of course, in that other series. It's been very delightful to write. Molly is quite intense. A lot of the things that happened to immigrants in New York at that time were very harrowing. The whole ladies' garment workers union and how they were treated, and various things. And one of them, she has to go into an insane asylum to try and rescue a girl who's been sent there by evil purposes. So they're quite harrowing to write. So when I write the Royal Spyness ones, I chuckle. And it's interesting to note this year that I've had so many letters from my readers who say, I've been rereading the whole series to help me get through this pandemic when I've been stuck in my room for a year. And they are a joy to write. I sit and write, and I call out to my husband, "Hey, listen to what Queenie just said." The characters make me laugh when I'm writing it, so I think they make other people laugh too. So both of those have been. But Lady Georgie, when she starts a series, she has led a very sheltered upbringing. She grew up in a castle in Scotland. She really hasn't had any exposure to the world at all, so she's rather naive. But she too has guts. She refuses to marry the rather awful prince that the family wants her to marry. She escapes down to London, and she tries to make her own way in the world. And of course, it's not easy. She has no money. She goes to their London house. It's the first time she's ever been without a servant to wait on her. And and she finds, it's a steep learning curve. How does that milk get to the doorstep? And who lights that fire that's crackling merrily? So after about a month, she's learned how to make tea and toast. She's feeling very proud of herself. And she decides she might start up a little house cleaning business. Of course, it doesn't go well, but so she has bright ideas, but she keeps going. She keeps her head above water, which is what I like about her. She never goes crawling into the family saying, "I couldn't make it."
True, true. And that leads in quite nicely to the next question, which is that, that the mystery crime genre does have its share of female stereotypes and tropes, ranging from being set up as a victim to motivate the male protagonist, or to being the wife or assistant to the male detective. So how do you work around or subvert such stereotypes to create female characters who have agency in dealing with the world around them, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Well, I've mentioned that both of my heroines they're spunky young women. They know. I think they're very comfortable in themselves. I think that's the main thing with them. They believe in themselves, and they believe in justice, and they believe in right, and they have a strong sense of right and wrong. And of course, during their stories, they are coming up against all the things that you are mentioning. They're coming up against young men who think that they're easy prey. They're young men who think it's a lot of fun to pin them against a wall somewhere. All the sort of things that many women have been through in their lives, and they manage to get out of them quite beautifully. I think, Molly manages to get out of them with a quick jab of the hat pin. And in fact, Lady Georgie, she's at a dinner, at a very posh dinner once, and she's sitting with an old colonel on either side of her, and she feels a hand on her left knee, and she thinks, oh. And then she looks up and she feels a hand on her right knee. So she's got two colonels sitting on either side of her, and she quietly picks up both the hands and puts them in each other. And when the colonels realize that they're holding hands with each other, they're incredibly embarrassed. So my heroines can take care. Obviously, you have to be realistic too. If you're writing with a female lead character in a crime novel, there are going to be times when they can't do what a man can do. For example, Molly Murphy, if she's chasing someone, she can't climb over a wall with all those skirts and petticoats that she's wearing. She's very happy in what she can do physically compared with a man. And both of them realize that, they can't sort of go into a room and say, right, I've come to arrest you, and grab a man and fling him to the floor. They can't do those things. But I think both of them use their powers of observation very well. I think they do that much better than women are very good at picking up the slightest hints of things. If a woman is sitting in a restaurant and a couple is sitting at another table, she will say to her husband, oh, that relationship's not going to last, is it? And he will say, what are you talking about? And she said, well, didn't you see the way she's playing with her napkin all the time she talks? She's nervous. And so women are very good at picking up those little things. They make very good sleuths. And then you do need a male sidekick at some stage to come in and actually do the arrests at the end, I think.
Indeed. Well, and speaking of women's observation powers, I mean, aside from that, your stories definitely passed the Bechdel test with their depiction of complex and interesting relationships between women. And for those of our viewers who are not familiar with the test, it basically asks whether a work, whether book, movie, TV series, etc., features at least two women talking to each other about something other than men. And I think, Rhys, many of your books are led by women and all include women in all manner of roles and relationships. Now, why do you think many authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are many more things that women talk about other than men, including their interesting observations about other people?
I suppose in my own life, I've always had very good relationships with other women, very strong friendships with other women. And so that's what I come from. I suppose starting off going to a girls' school, you're used to having strong female friendships. And I was raised not to think of myself as a beautiful appendage to a man. I was raised to think of myself, my own career, and if a man was part of it, then that was quite nice. But so, in the Royal Spyness books, my friends Belinda and Georgie are great friends and have been through an awful lot together, very sometimes harrowing in some of the books, sometimes funny in some of the books, but the friendship is very strong. In the other series, Molly Murphy series, Molly has two female friends that have become like her older sisters. And they live across the street from her in New York, and they are a lesbian couple, which was a fairly in Greenwich Village at that time was becoming quite bohemian, and this would have been a fairly normal thing to have. And Molly doesn't have sisters, and she's alone in New York in a difficult environment, and they have become really her rock in that they look after her, and they're a place she can run to when she needs to. And when I put them into the stories, I started getting hate letters from people saying, "Now you've included that awful lesbian couple. I'm not going to read your books." And so I wrote back to each of them saying, "I've brought them into the story for two reasons. One is that they would have been the sort of neighbours that Molly would have encountered in Greenwich Village at that time. So I'm trying to make sure that I give an authentic environment. And reason number two is that they are the neighbors that I want." So
yes, I like Sid and Gus, so I'm all for them.
yeah, yes.
Okay, so what can you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
Well, I think the only time this is going to fall down is if you are a male writer and you think that you can write women realistically when you don't actually bother to listen that much. I mean, most women I know have got strong female friends, and most of the time we certainly don't talk about men. I mean, obviously at my time of life we don't talk about men as much as I did when I was 18, but in college, that one discussed all sorts of things from, literature, art, the world, travel, politics. And, I think you get much more out of a conversation with other women because, especially when you're young, because sometimes I know women have held back in expressing opinions when there's a man present because they don't want They don't want to sound too overbearing, or they don't want to be criticized. So I think growing up you were also in a girls' school, I know, and growing up in a girls' school has given one tremendous confidence. And I know people who grew up in co-ed schools have often not wanted to appear too smart in math classes because the boys will think less of them. And I mean, that's a terrible thing. I actually have I have granddaughters who are now in college, and they are the older one did 4 years of engineering in high school, and including computer programming. And so when she was in college, she went to her first computer programming course, and she sat down, and nearly everybody in the room was a male. So she sat down, and she turned to the person next to her and she said, "How do we log into this?" And he rolled his eyes as if to say, "Oh God, blonde female, she won't know how to do a thing." So so they started, and the instructor gave them the first problem, put the first problem, and Lizzie sort of went, do, 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 do. So what do we do next? And they all went, "Can't have finished it yet." Yes, I have.
Oh dear, yes.
You know, bringing up daughters to believe that they can do anything they want to has been, you know, something that I've done and something that all my friends have done. So I think it's very rare these days that you would have women who think that their whole identity lies in pleasing a man. I think that just doesn't exist as much anymore. The younger generation are very comfortable in their own skins.
True, very true. Oh, we do have a question from the audience. Let me just show it here. So it's from Misty, who's one of our regular viewers. Hi, Misty. And her question is, what are your characters' thoughts about the suffrage movement, both in the US and in the UK? If you were to write in a scene about one of those marches, then how would your characters react? And this is an interesting question because I know you have written about this in your Molly Murphy book.
Yeah, actually, in my Molly Murphy series, the suffrage movement does play an ongoing part. Molly has been part of one of those marches on the Easter parade. With the Easter parade, a group of former Vassar students all marched down with the parade down Fifth Avenue, carrying banners saying, you know, Vassar girls for women, votes for women. And they were, Molly joins them, and they had abuse hurled at them as they walked down. They also had mud thrown at them. And interestingly enough, a lot of the abusers were women in the crowd who were shouting, "Go home to your husbands and stay in your kitchen and do what you're supposed to do." And the interesting thing was, because it became disruptive, they were hauled off. The police came and hauled them off, not the people who, oh, I know what happened. The brother of one of them rushes out of the crowd and says, "Come home at once, you're disgracing the family." And she says, "No, I'm not going to come home." There's a bit of a scuffle. The police arrest all of them and they're taken to jail because they were the disruptors, even though they were marching peacefully. I mean, isn't it interesting how this goes on still today? But so that's in one of the books. In another of the books, we meet some of the heads of the suffrage movement, and we meet people planning to do what to do next. So it is that underlying ongoing theme. And you know, when I talk to people about these books, and I say, how, if I took you to Molly's New York, you would feel very comfortable there. It would look pretty much the same as it does today in parts that I'm writing about. I could take you around those streets, and you would, you know, apart from the fact that there would be horses apart rather than automobiles, you would feel comfortable in that place. But you have to remember, half the population couldn't vote. So half the population couldn't decide who was going to be mayor of New York because they weren't allowed to vote. And also in New York at that time, the law said that a woman was property of her husband. If she left him and wanted a divorce, she had no chance of keeping the children. And it took just the husband and one doctor's signature to have her committed to an insane asylum. And you can bet how often that was used when you wanted to get rid of an inconvenient wife. And also he was allowed to beat her with a stick that was no thicker than his thumb. That's the rule of thumb, ladies. So so I love to bring in a lot of real history and that feeling of what it was like to be in a situation where you really have no power. and yet in spite of it, Molly Murphy believes she has power and is doing everything. With the Royal Spyness books, they are in the 1930s, where luckily women have been given the vote by then. Not every woman. No, I think it was only married women still when the series starts. But at least we do acknowledge that women now have the vote. But it's a very strong theme in my books.
Yes, it is. And I mean, that's quite interesting what you're saying. I mean, we know that stories can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change. Now, books and stories in the mystery crime genre usually involve some kind of violence, including violence against women. And even though many of your books can be classified as cozy historical mysteries where the violence takes place off page, you still have some scenes like in A Royal Pain where Lady Georgiana is almost raped by her acquaintance, Gussie Gromby. And in The Last Mrs. Summers, which you just read for us, you included a foreword to inform readers about how young female servants were considered fair game for their male employers in the time the series was set in. Now, clearly, you have shown that mystery crime novels can address the issue of sexism, misogyny, and violence against women effectively while telling an excellent story. So, what would you suggest to mystery crime authors who are figuring out how to tackle the issue of violence against women without falling back on harmful stereotypes and tropes?
Yeah, it was interesting that the piece I chose to read was really a foreshadowing of the question that you've just asked, which is, the underlying story of this book is the fact that in those days, a young female servant was completely powerless. If the master of the house has designs on her, either she could leave her job and then have no job, and often these were girls who had no family to go back to, or she would give in to him. And so there's like a double story going through this of exactly that sort of thing happening. And I was asked to write a foreword because my editor was very uncomfortable with this theme. And I said, well, I want readers to know that this happened. That, I mean, it may even happen today. I mean, there are certain, as we find out all the time, there are young women who are in jobs who can't afford to lose their job, but are getting unwanted advances and don't really know how to handle it without being fired. So there are still situations today when young women are at the mercy of someone who has more power. It's all about power. And I think, that's one thing I want to bring out in the books is that it's the whole male-female thing is all about power. And so, I try and bring that up. You're right, I don't like to put violence on screen. If there's something like that, you mentioned that scene in which Gussie Gormley tries to force Lady Georgie to have sex with him, and and it's one of those scenes where she thinks she can handle it, and then she suddenly realizes how much stronger he is, and luckily she gets away. But I wanted also to show that she, in these early books, was a very naive girl. She hadn't had to deal with this very much. I think if the same thing happened much later in the series, she'd be much better equipped for it. But I don't like reading about violence on screen, so I tend to have my to find a body that's already been killed, or so
Right.
I'm very much in the tradition of Agatha Christie in that manner, that I like my young women to not to have to see anything that's too gruesome.
Yeah. And I mean, coming off a bit on that, like rape and sexual assault, or at least the threat of it, is something that is present in many mystery crime novels and is often a major plot driver. Do you think that consent is an issue that mystery crime authors have started tackling successfully in recent years?
Oh, I think, with the whole Me Too movement, I think that really brought everything out into the open that we've been talking about for a long time. I think, when we've had like the Harvey Weinstein trial and all those things, it's come out how many young women have felt themselves powerless because they needed the job, or they had no one to stick up for them, or they were just they got themselves into a situation that they couldn't get out of. And so, to write, I think most writers these days are very conscious that they want to show women being strong enough and being. I don't think you ever really want to show a young woman as a victim. I think you think of the old crime novels where you had those covers with the woman sprawled across the floor and the man, you know, it was always the man was the strong one and she was the weak one. And I think it started, if you go back to Sue Grafton and Kinsey Malone, I think that broke all the norms and all the traditions of the mystery novel. Suddenly she was the detective and she wasn't afraid to use her gun and she wasn't afraid to use her fist or whatever. She was a tough broad. And that spawned several other tough broads. And I think ever since then, none of us have felt too afraid to have our women stick up for themselves and get out of difficult situations.
Yeah. And do you think that there is a difference between how male authors and female authors in the genre handle rape, sexual assault, and consent?
Oh, I'm sure there is, because I mean, it just comes down to the fact that most men have no clue. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a really good little movie clip in which a man comes into the police station and says, I was just mugged and I had my wallet taken. And it's a female police sergeant, and she looks at him and she says, "Is that what you were wearing when your wallet was taken?" What? She says, "Well, I have to admit that it's a very nice suit. It's the sort of suit that's actually saying to someone, come and mug me because I must be rich." And he goes, "What are you thinking about?" But I mean, the parallel was, it was just so obvious that most men would never consider that. I mean, they you know, and so I think for a man to write about what a woman would go through, I think it would take a very sensitive and very, very observant man. I think most men obviously write male heroes, and the male hero is, you know, the classic Jack Reacher type, who is, you know, strong arm and grab the woman sort of thing. So, you know, luckily there are lots of female writers who can write true stories about the woman's point of view and what it's like to be a woman in difficult situations. I mean, every crime novel is either about a murder or it's about some really difficult situation that a woman finds herself in.
True. And speaking of, so in 2018, the Staunch Prize, an award set up to recognize crime and thriller novels without violence against women, was launched and faced criticism from major crime novelists like Val McDermid, who believe that as long as there is violence against women in the world, it should be reflected in fiction. So, what is your take on the idea that mystery crime books can work without some form of violence against women? Do you think it's feasible given some of the long-standing genre conventions and tropes?
My feeling is that a writer should be free to write what is in her or his heart. I know Val well, and she writes brilliant books. They're more violent than I would ever write, but you know, she writes them authentically. I think whatever you write, it should be authentic for you. Personally, I shy away from showing too much violence. But if I thought I could show it well and meaningfully, and ending up at the end of the book with a good discussion on whether it could have been handled differently, then I would do that. But every writer should write what they feel is in their heart. And, you know, that's what I've always. Nobody should write anything that they think will sell well or will please other people. They should write exactly what they want to write.
And speaking of, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and as human beings?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think, you know, if you read any of the women in any of my books, you will come away with that feeling immediately. I mean, you take some of my standalone novels where we have Pamela, who's working at Bletchley Park, and we have her sister, who is actually a spy in Paris during World War II. I mean, these are women who are doing very difficult jobs and doing them very well. And I like to show in my books that women can do pretty much anything that a man can do, and they can do it well. So yeah, I think all of my women have been strong, independent. I mean, not abnormally so. You know, I'm not writing Wonder Woman where someone's going to come in and punch all the bad guys. I'm writing women who are negotiating through a real and sometimes very difficult world, and they will come up against the things that every reader who reads these will have come up against. And I don't want them to have a magic way out of things, but I want them to come out of them through their own intelligence and smarts and observations. And you know, I want to be proud of my heroines, and I think I am.
Definitely. And yeah, speaking of being proud, you know, parents are usually the most influential role models in a person's life. As a mother and grandmother yourself, what do you think parents can do to help prevent violence against women and girls in future generations, and to get boys involved in helping to do so?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there in the fact that it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to say to young women, this is what you have to do to avoid violence. The whole secret is working with your sons. And if you have, you know, if your husband is a good male role model, and from the very beginning he says to the sons, this is how you treat young women, then, you know, then you've achieved half the thing. You also bring up your young girls to think that they should, well, I think it all comes down to a strong moral and religious background, what's right and what's wrong. And you know, in our family, we've always talked about those things. And my own daughters are all very strong women now, and my granddaughters are certainly, you know, I would like to see any male try and. I've got two granddaughters who are elite water polo players, and one of they're 5'8" and 5'9", and I think they could deck any man who's at them. But no, I mean. You know, and I've spoken to them. I'm sure their mother has spoken to them about, you know, never getting yourself into the situation to start with. That, you know, if you study something like Tai Chi or those things, the mantra for the whole of that is avoid, avoid, avoid. So you bring your young girls up to not going to this situation, not drinking too much at a party, not going with a guy when you don't feel completely comfortable. You know, all those things. To be aware of your surroundings is something that's really important, and I've stressed that always with my own kids.
Lovely. We do have another question from Misty. Here,
Yeah.
I see that you wrote a children's book. Do you have plans to write any more?
Yeah. Well, my daughter and I wrote a very nice book, sort of a Harry Potter type book. About the Red Dragon Academy, and we plan to write more, but the big problem for both of us has been time. You know, I still write 2 books a year, and they're quite long books too. You know, my standalone novels are about 400 pages. There just hasn't been the time. We keep saying we'll just take one summer and we'll sit and write the next book, but we do plan to eventually. I just need a little bit more time. I need to clone myself, I think, then it'll be much easier.
Yeah, and you don't write them under Rhys Bowen, right?
Well, Claire and I, my daughter and I did write one under Rhys Bowen and Claire Bowen,
Okay.
yes. And we wrote that about 4 years ago. And I think one of the reasons we didn't go on was it was not sort of picked up by a major publisher in the way we hoped it would be. So it was a little discouraging to us. So we sort of decided that we wouldn't go on unless we saw a clear path to, you know, to being published and selling more.
Yeah. Well, hopefully someone's eyes will be open and they will pick up your book.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. In the meantime, I've got plenty to keep me busy. I have to say, you know, I've got my 2 books waiting to be written every year. I don't have much time to breathe.
True. Always nose to the grind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've come to our final question, actually. You have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. And this may be a bit of an obvious question, but why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Yeah, it is an obvious question, isn't it? I'm a woman. I have daughters. I have granddaughters. You know, I think if you look at years and years and years of women as seen as helpless, as in a male-dominated world, I don't think my granddaughters could believe that if you go back to, say, the 1960s, 1950s, 1960s, you look at the TV shows, the mother is at home with an apron on, baking cookies, and the father is outside mending the car with the son. And the mother sort of says, I can't say that. We have to wait till your father gets home to decide that. It was completely, the father was the one in charge, the mother was the one at home. And then I Love Lucy, you take I Love Lucy, and those were obviously silly comedies. But in one of those, Lucy is terrified because she's bought a hat without asking Ricky. So it's a situation in which the man had all the power and the woman had no power. And so, that has gone on until fairly quite recently. I mean, now I look around and I'm so happy when you see that the chairman of the International Monetary Fund is a woman, and the president of so many countries is a woman, and our wonderful vice president here is a woman now, which I'm thrilled about. That finally people are going to say, is it a man or a woman? And they would not think twice about whatever it was. But that still has got a lot of prejudice against it. There are still parts of the world where men think that they're smarter than women, and they think women belong in the home. And that's in America, we've got this whole Proud Boy movement now. These disenfranchised white men who think that part of the problem of they're not getting anywhere in life is that women should be sent back to the kitchen. And so it's this underlying thing all the time. So we have to keep working, and we have to, as writers, I do have a voice, and I like showing that my heroines can tackle anything that you give them, and I like to speak up too.
Yeah, and aside from that, I mean, what do you think authors specifically can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Well, it's interesting because I write all of my novels are historical, so I'm writing about the past, and I hope that my readers, by reading about the past and by seeing how it was, can say, oh, well, we shouldn't make sure that doesn't happen again, because you can draw parallels from the past and see how bad it was. In one of the books, sending a young woman to an insane asylum because she didn't do what you wanted her to do. That happened in the past, and you can see we've come a long way, but then you can see we've got a longer way to go.
Yeah, we always need to learn about the past in order to change the future, right?
Yep, we do.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Rhys, for that lovely session. I really enjoyed listening to your answers. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Before we go, I would just like to remind everyone about the goodie bundles that Rhys has generously donated to our stash of author goodies that are perks for donors at our Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. Goodie number 1 is the Molly Murphy gift bundle, which Rhys has talked quite a fair bit about. And this is Rhys's special treat for fans of her excellent Molly Murphy series, especially those who are book collectors. And it includes one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover Molly Murphy book of your choice, and one handwritten letter on special old paper by Molly Murphy herself. And goodie number 2 is the Lady Georgiana gift bundle. So Royal Spyness fans, particularly book collectors, can get their hands on one first edition, signed and personalized hardcover Royal Spyness book of your choice, as well as one handwritten letter on special old paper by Lady Georgiana herself. And there is only one of each gift bundle available, so once it's taken, it's gone. So do make the requested donation, and Rhys will send your set straight to you. There are also plenty more author goodies available from authors like Adriana Herrera, Beck McMaster, Jeannie Lin, Jennifer Estep, Alaya Don Johnson, Bridget Cameron, and more. New goodies will be released every Thursday throughout this month. And here's where you can go to get them. Let me get my slide up for you to look at. Here we go. So you can donate to get these goodies on Rally Up at http bit.ly R for P Rally Up IWD 2021. And if you want to learn more about Read for Pixels, go to bit.ly/Read for Pixels. And I believe Juliana is also sharing those links over at YouTube. We need to reach our fundraising goal of $5,000 by April 15, so please do give generously. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. And to find out more about our work and what you can do about it, visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. And Rhys, do you have any announcements for us?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I have a new book coming out on April the 13th worldwide, and it's one of my big standalone novels, and it's called The Venice Sketchbook. Now, if you've been itching to travel during this time when we've all been stuck at home, this is the book for you, because it takes place in Venice in 1928, in 1938, and again in 2001. And it's a story of two women, generations apart, and a secret that has been left for the second woman to find out about her great aunt's secret life. So it's one of those nice two different time periods and two parallel stories going throughout the book. I find they're fun to write, and so yeah, it comes out on April the 11th, and you can get it worldwide from Amazon, or I'm sure booksellers near you too.
Oh, that certainly sounds intriguing. Well, thank you once again to Rhys and to everyone for tuning in. Have a good day or good night wherever you are in the world.
Well, thank you, everybody. Take care. Stay safe, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye.